Imagine making $1,000 in a single month purely from selling STL files. Well, back in August of 2023, I was able to hit my first $1,000 in a single month from just selling STL files from just a single site. Let's talk about it. My name is Brandon, and I've been designing and selling digital products, and more specifically, STL files, and as well as 3D printable designs for the past 4 years now. And over the past 4 years, 3D printing has evolved so rapidly and so quickly that now you can pretty much create designs today and have something printed out, made, and done today. And the cool thing about that is that virtually anyone can be a designer, virtually anyone can get started with creating products, and virtually anyone can make money from anywhere if you have a skill of creating some really cool stuff and being able to print that and showcase it to the world as a really cool or unique item. When I first got started, 3D printing wasn't this fabulous thing to have around. Honestly, it was quite ugly. My first printer was an Ender 5, and that printer was a Core XY printer. And honestly, although it was clunky, it was big, it was noisy, and honestly not really that good looking, it still did its job. And although it still did its job and I knew that there was a bunch of problems with it, I still went ahead and purchased another one. I needed a sister for it, so I got the Ender 3. Shortly thereafter that, I got a longer LK4, and suddenly I had kind of like a mini print farm in a sense, right? Mini print farm. But my first introduction to making money with 3D printing is when I realized that people could actually sell 3D printed designs online. Now, I've personally never sold any sort of 3D printed item online prior to that. I've had sold digital products online and as well as digital services and did come from a sales background, but I never had tinkered with creating or designing stuff, more or less the fact that I would have to design it and then print it and then market it somehow. So, my introduction to that was to sell something different and unique. And at that time, it was very hard to differentiate yourself unless you had some specific skill or skill set to add along to it. But at that time, it was really hard to do that. So the only way I knew around it was to sell neon signs. Within my first year, I was able to make around $3,500 selling neon signs. And these were signs that I made myself. I would 3D print the outline and then I would embed the neon strips into the outline itself. I would solder everything together. And then by the end of it, I actually had a sign that I can sell for $80 to $150 a pop. And because the build plate was kind of small on my Ender 3, it really didn't have to be too big and it could have been a small logo in that sense, and it could have charged quite a bit because neon signs were going for anywhere from like $100 to 150 to even $200, $300, and still to this day they are quite expensive. The cool thing about what I was doing at that time was that nobody was doing it. At least no one that I could find. I searched up YouTube tutorials, I searched up videos, I looked on Reddit, and honestly, no one was really doing that. No one was selling 3D printed signs and then using neon, embedding that neon into the sign, and then selling it online. It just wasn't a thing. So what was really cool about that is that I was able to undercut my competition because one, filament is cheap, and honestly, it still is kind of cheap. And two, you're really just paying for the labor for someone to install these signs, right? So you're just paying for someone to put everything together and to piece it together, to solder it, and to have all the materials all in one place and making it a presentable product to give to the customer. And within my first year, I was able to bring in anywhere from around 34 to $3,600 from in revenue from just those products, and with a profit margin of around 40 to 60%, because mainly it was just my labor that you're really paying for at the end of the day. Now 3D printing is vastly different. Now you can create products, now you can sell STL files, and now there are people practically overnight creating full-blown subscriptions to get access to their designs and the files. And what I want to do in this video is break down more or less the exact 3 skills that you need to know to get started with this business and exactly what you need to do in order to implement this so you can start making money as soon as possible. The first skill I would highly recommend that anyone would learn is 3D modeling. Hands down, you can't avoid this. If you want to make this a sustainable business, if you don't want to pay for someone else's license to their commercial access to their designs, and if you don't want to be handicapped based off a skill set, you're going to need to learn 3D modeling. And hands down, that's probably one of the most useful skills that I've ever learned when it comes to creating stuff within this space. I would have rather have learned 3D modeling first than 3D printing, rather than learning 3D printing and then learning 3D modeling. Usually it's the other way around where you learn 3D printing and then over time you're kind of forced to learn 3D modeling. So when I really got serious about this, and I would say this was around 2022, This is around the time when Bamboo released their first version of their X1 carbons. And at that time, I had an Ender 3, had the Ender 5, and the LK4. And I knew that if I wanted to go all in on this, I had to make a commitment myself. And $1,600 to get a X1 carbon and an AMS on essentially a company that kind of have to bet on that they're going to fulfill their product, and their product is not going to break 1 month in, especially when it comes to 3D printing and how a lot of 3D printing companies had failed in the past. So I went all in. I sold my printers, put all my money into my Bamboo X1 carbon. As soon as that thing came in, blown away. That thing, crazy. 1 month later, I got it a sister, named it Amanda, and now I have Dorothy and Amanda. But of course, at that time, once I went all in, I learned 3D modeling. My skill set around 3D printing got better, and I took 3D printing much more seriously. And when you take it much more seriously, instead of treating it like a hobby, you treat it more like a business. And as I started treating it more like a business, my skill set around 3D modeling had to improve. And not because it had to, but because I really wanted it to improve. I started creating more designs. I started creating more artwork. I started putting out new artwork every single week. And truthfully, you kind of have to get into that process, which leads me to my next thing. You need to be consistent. So, not only do you need to be good at 3D modeling, but you need to put out new designs and new artwork as often as you can. And of course, it has to be good artwork. It can't just be stuff that you make overnight and then you kind of put something together and hope that people would buy it or download it or just like your stuff. You really need to sit down, draw it up, think about it, piece it together, prototype it, take photos of it, and then present it in such a way where someone would want to take that and then print it. It is a cycle of you creating designs, prototyping it, and then presenting it to the world. And hopefully, what you present to the world actually sells, which is why you want to constantly be creating new designs. Because if you don't learn that skill set, you're going to eventually fall off. If you're not creating at least 1 to 2 new projects every single week, how will you ever know if what you make is a success? For example, it took me maybe 10 to 12 designs before I got to that one design that really blew up. And then it took me a few more tries until I got to that next design that really did really well. And honestly, I would have never known I'd be able to create some of the designs I've created without have making all these other somewhat crappy designs in a sense, although they're not really crappy. But to me, I kind of look back and I think, wow, that's not that great. That's not that good. But to someone else, they might see that and say, whoa, that's pretty cool. And this is just me reflecting to myself. But truthfully, when I look back at my designs, I still think I can do better and I can create better stuff and I can improve on these things and make these products better because I'm constantly thinking, what can I do to make these things better? And that's where the process of learning that skill of creating new stuff. And as you create new stuff, your newer stuff becomes better and you're going to want to improve on your skill set so you can create newer, and better stuff. But of course, it's not enough just to be good at 3D modeling. It's not enough just to create new stuff every single week. Honestly, you got to tell people about it. So you got to create content. You got to share videos. You have to make posts. You need to post it online. You need to kind of sub hint to people that you're making something, right? You need to tell people the story behind the product. Truthfully, for me, I suck at the content side of it. I really don't like making content. Just me sitting down making videos like this, kind of uncomfortable, but it's a necessary part of it. And I want to get my story out to people who are just getting started and who want to take it seriously. So, creating content is a great way to do it. Now, I have a TikTok page with just a little bit over or under 30,000 followers. And then I have an Instagram page with just a little bit over 10K followers. Now, truthfully, I don't really care about the numbers or the number of followers. All I care about is whether my product does well and people like it and they receive it well. For me, if they receive it well and they love it, I think that's a great product, regardless or not how many views it gets. Truthfully, all I care about is making good stuff that people would want to buy and consume, print, and then share it. And it's really cool to see people print these designs and tag me in videos and get to see what they have made from my work and creations. And the thing with 3D printing and the thing with a lot of creative hobbies is that we most of the time get in our own way. For example, I had this one design and it was this toolbox that I had made and it's probably one of the most popular designs I've made. And it took me a month to make that design. And not because it actually took a month to make it, but it took me a month because I was too much of a perfectionist. Like I wanted it to be perfect, but in reality, it wasn't perfect. It was good. It was great. Honestly, it was great. I would say it's a good product, but it wasn't perfect. No product is perfect. Not even the iPhone is perfect. So I sat on it. I basically just I made the design, printed it, didn't think anything of it. I never published it or anything like that. 2 months later, I was like, you know what? I already have the design. I already took the photos. Let me just throw this out there and see how people respond to it. Funny enough, that happens to be one of my most viewed videos for that design. And truthfully, I probably could add much more in sales, much more followers sooner, and much more people buying my stuff sooner. But I got in my own way from doing that because I was afraid and wanted it to be perfect. Instead of just taking imperfect action, I allowed the perfectionism and the wanting to be perfect get in the way of what the future success was. Now, of course, it's hard to tell whether that was the case, looking back at it now, thinking, well, maybe it was the right thing that you were afraid to do something because that imperfect action or that action its own that you trying to be perfect led to it leading up to when you decided to post it. It was the right time and everything like that. Cool. But my point with this video is that to succeed in this business, you need to constantly be creating new stuff. You need to constantly increase your skill set, make it better, do better, create better stuff, learn new skills, and you need to tell more people about these things. You need to create content, you need to share your products, you need to publish those products, you need to tell people about those products, you need to tell existing customers about your new products. And truthfully, those three things on its own will make you successful in this business. It's not creating a logo, it's not finding a website, it's not building a Shopify, it's not doing anything else other than just purely creating stuff that people would want to buy. And if you can do that, you can possibly make $1,000 in a single month purely from selling STL files and probably even more. I would want you guys to do even better than that because you can absolutely do it. And truthfully, there's only a handful of people actually making that kind of money with 3D printing. But with that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know this video is a little bit more of a rant and more or less just me speaking from my chest about these skills that I think that are crucial to making this hobby into a successful business. And the reason why I say this is because over the past few weeks, I've spoken to maybe 50 to 100 people, and I've seen it time and time and again where most people that I've spoken to, they struggle with either one, having zero knowledge around 3D printing or 3D modeling. Two, they don't know where to start. Or three, they let themselves get in their own way. And honestly, the last one is the one that I think resonates with us most of all, that we get in our own way from taking action. I've spoken to so many people who are focused on being a perfectionist and wanting things to be perfect. And then when I look at their stuff is good already, and they should just share it and post it. But maybe it's time that I should also take my own advice because my stuff is good and it's great and people download it anyway. Even I don't think it's perfect, which is funny because that's part of the hobby in its own. That's part of being creative. But hopefully this video has touched you guys in some sense. Learn those three skills, create new stuff, learn 3D modeling, create content, and take more action on it. I mean, seriously, you'd be surprised as to what happens when you do it. I've seen people go from $500 in a single month to $6,000 from 3D printing in less than 2 months. Literally crazy times we live in. But with that said, see you guys in the next video. Peace.